The dust devil kicked up on the edge of Lovelock, Nevada, and Bethany Tucker knew she had maybe 3 more weeks before her secret would be impossible to hide beneath the loose cotton dresses she had been wearing since April. It was now late August in the year 1878, and the summer heat made everything harder, including keeping her condition concealed from the good people of this small town who had taken her in 6 months ago. When she had arrived on the afternoon stage with nothing but a worn carpetbag and a story about heading west to start fresh after her parents had died. That part was true, at least. What she had not told anyone was that she was running from shame, from whispered accusations, and from a man back in St. Louis who had promised her marriage and then disappeared the moment she told him about the baby. She pressed her hand against her lower back as she stood behind the counter of the general store where Mr. Henderson had been kind enough to give her work. The ache had started that morning and had not let up, but she could not afford to complain. Jobs for women were scarce enough, without adding a reputation for weakness to her growing list of problems. Through the store window, she could see the main street of Lovelock stretching out in both directions. The buildings weathered but sturdy, the people hardy, and used to the harsh Nevada landscape. She had thought this place, so far from everything she had known, might offer her a chance to disappear, to become someone new. But small towns had a way of knowing everything about everyone, and time was running out. The bell above the door chimed, and Bethany quickly straightened, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders despite the heat. A tall man walked in, his boots heavy on the wooden floor, his hat shading his face until he looked up. She recognized him immediately. Everyone in Lovelock knew Jackson Edwards. He owned the largest ranch in the county, thousands of acres stretching out into the desert and up into the foothills where his cattle grazed. He was only 28 years old, but he had inherited the land from his father 5 years back and had built it into something even more prosperous. He was known for being fair, hardworking, and intensely private. He came into town once a week for supplies, spoke to few people, and never lingered longer than necessary. "Afternoon," he said, his voice low and even. His eyes were a startling blue-green, the color of sagebrush after a rare rain, and they settled on her with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she forced herself to meet his gaze. "Good afternoon, Mr. Edwards. What can I help you with today?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt, which was a small victory. He moved through the store with purpose, gathering items and placing them on the counter. Flour, sugar, coffee, salt, a new rope, ammunition for his rifle, the usual supplies. She tallied them up, her hands moving automatically, but she could feel his gaze on her. It was not the leering kind of attention she had learned to dread. It was something else, something more like concern, and that worried her even more. "You feeling all right, Miss Tucker?" he asked as she wrapped his items in brown paper. "Just fine, thank you." She kept her eyes down, focusing on making neat corners with the paper. "You look pale. This heat can be dangerous. Make sure you are drinking enough water." "I will. That will be $4.30. He counted out the money and placed it on the counter, but he did not pick up his packages right away. "Are you new to Nevada? I mean, you have been here a while, but are you used to the summers yet?" "I am adjusting," she said, forcing a small smile. "Is there anything else you need?" He studied her for another long moment, and she had the unsettling feeling that he could see right through all her carefully constructed defenses. But then he gathered his supplies, touched the brim of his hat in a polite gesture, and left without another word. She watched him load his packages into his wagon and drive away, his figure straight and solid against the bright sky. That evening, as she walked back to the boarding house where she rented a tiny room on the second floor, the ache in her back intensified. She climbed the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing, one hand supporting her belly. Mrs. Crawford, who ran the boarding house, was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and the smell of frying meat made Bethany's stomach turn. She had been lucky so far. The morning sickness had been mild and had passed quickly, but exhaustion was her constant companion now. In her room, she lay down on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. The baby moved, a flutter that had become more pronounced in recent weeks, and she placed her hand over the spot, feeling the life inside her. Despite everything, despite the fear and the shame and the uncertainty, she loved this child already. That was the truth she carried with her every day. She had made mistakes, terrible ones, but the baby was innocent, and she would do whatever it took to give her child a chance at a good life. But what kind of life could she provide? She had almost no money saved. Mr. Henderson paid her fairly, but the cost of her room and food took most of her wages. She had been trying to set aside a little each week, but it was never enough. And once the baby came, she would not be able to work for weeks, maybe months. No one would hire a woman with an infant, especially an unmarried woman. The calculations ran through her mind for the 1,000th time, and the answer was always the same. She was running out of options. The next morning, she woke before dawn to the sound of horses in the street. She got up and looked out the window to see a group of riders heading out of town, probably ranch hands heading to one of the spreads in the area. The sky was just beginning to lighten, streaks of pink and gold spreading across the horizon. She dressed carefully, choosing her loosest dress and pinning her shawl in place. Each day it got harder to hide her condition, and she knew it was only a matter of time before someone noticed. At the store, Mr. Henderson was already there, sweeping the floor. He was a kind man in his 60s, round-faced and cheerful, and he had never asked her prying questions. She was grateful for that. "Morning, Bethany," he called out. "Sleep well?" "Well enough, thank you." "Good, good. I am expecting a big delivery today. Wagon should be here by noon. We'll need your help unloading and organizing everything." Her heart sank. Heavy lifting was exactly what she needed to avoid, but she could not refuse without explanation. "Of course," she said. The morning passed slowly. Customers came and went, mostly women buying fabric and thread, men picking up tools or tobacco. She kept busy, but the ache in her back never left, and by mid-morning she was feeling dizzy. She sat down on the stool behind the counter whenever she could, but Mr. Henderson noticed. "You sure you are all right?" he asked, his bushy eyebrows drawing together in concern. "Just a little tired. I will be fine." At noon, the freight wagon arrived, piled high with crates and barrels. The driver and his assistant began unloading, and Mr. Henderson directed them to stack everything near the back door. Bethany started carrying smaller boxes inside, careful not to lift anything too heavy, but even the lighter loads made her breathless. She was in the storeroom, rearranging items to make space, when a wave of dizziness hit her so hard she had to grab the shelf to keep from falling. She stood there, breathing hard, her vision swimming. The baby kicked hard as if protesting the strain. She knew she needed to sit down to rest, but she could hear Mr. Henderson calling for her. She took a deep breath and stepped back into the main room, but her foot caught on the edge of a crate and she stumbled. She would have fallen if strong hands had not caught her arms, steadying her. She looked up, startled, into the face of Jackson Edwards. "Easy there," he said, his voice calm but firm. He guided her to the stool and made her sit. "When is the last time you ate?" "This morning." It was a lie. She had not been able to stomach breakfast. He did not look convinced. He turned to Mr. Henderson, who had hurried over. "She needs rest and food. She should not be lifting anything." "I was just having her organize," Mr. Henderson said, but he looked worried. Bethany, maybe you should go home for the day. I am fine, really. But even as she said it, another wave of dizziness made the room tilt. Jackson Edwards crouched down so he was at eye level with her. His expression was serious, his eyes searching her face. "Miss Tucker, you are not fine, and I think we both know why," her breath caught. She wanted to deny it, to protest, but the words died in her throat. She saw understanding in his eyes and something else. Not judgment, not disgust, something closer to compassion. "How far along are you?" he asked quietly, so only she could hear. She could not speak. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she hated herself for the weakness, but she could not stop them. She had held everything together for so long, and now, with this stranger seeing through all her pretenses, the dam broke. 6 months, maybe 7, she whispered. "Please do not tell anyone. I just need a little more time." He stood up, his jaw tight, then he turned to Mr. Henderson. "I need to speak with Miss Tucker privately. May we use your office?" Mr. Henderson looked between them, confused but sensing the gravity of the situation. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Jackson offered her his arm, and she took it because she was not sure she could walk steadily on her own. He led her into the small office at the back of the store and closed the door. It was cramped, with barely enough room for the desk and 2 chairs, but it was private. He pulled out a chair for her and waited until she sat before taking the other chair. "You are in trouble," he said. It was not a question. She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "The father. Gone. He left before I could tell him. I thought he would marry me, but I was wrong." The words felt like broken glass coming out of her mouth. "Family. Dead. Both my parents died last year. I have no one." He was quiet for a moment, his hands resting on his knees, his expression thoughtful. Then he said something she never could have expected. "I will raise that child like my own." She looked up sharply. "What? Marry me. Come to the ranch. I will give the baby my name, and no one will ever question it. You will be safe, and so will your child." She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You do not even know me." "I know enough. You are hardworking. You keep to yourself. You are in a situation no woman should have to face alone, and I have the means to help. Why would you do this?" Her voice was shaking. "What do you want from me?" His expression softened. "I am not asking for anything you are not willing to give. This would be a practical arrangement. You need security, and I need. Companionship is not the right word. I have been alone on that ranch for 5 years. It is a hard life, and it would be easier with someone to share it. But I will not force anything on you. You will have your own space. We will figure things out as we go. People will talk. Let them. By the time anyone realizes the baby comes a little early, we will be established as a married couple. No one will think twice about it." She searched his face, looking for deceit, for hidden motives, but all she saw was sincerity. It was insane. She had known this man for all of 5 minutes of actual conversation, but what choice did she have? She could try to hide for another few weeks, but then what? Give birth alone? Hope for charity from people who would shun her once they knew the truth? "I do not love you," she said, needing to be honest. "I am not asking you to, not yet. Maybe not ever, but we can build something if you are willing to try." The baby kicked again, as if weighing in on the decision. She placed her hand over her belly and took a deep breath. "When? Tomorrow we will go to the courthouse, make it official, then we will head to the ranch." "That is very fast." "Do we have time to waste?" He was right. She knew he was right. "All right," she said. "I will marry you." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good, I will make the arrangements. Can you be ready to leave town by tomorrow afternoon?" "Yes." "Then it is settled." He stood up and offered his hand. She took it, and he helped her to her feet. His hand was warm, calloused from work, and steady. She realized she was shaking, and he must have felt it too, because he did not let go right away. "It will be all right," he said. "I promise you that." She wanted to believe him. She had to believe him because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. The rest of the day passed in a blur. She told Mr. Henderson she was leaving, and he was sad to see her go but understanding. She did not give him details, just said she had an opportunity that was too good to pass up. That night, she packed her few belongings and lay awake in her narrow bed, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or the smartest decision she could possibly make. The next morning, Jackson Edwards arrived at the boarding house with a small bouquet of wildflowers. They were simple, desert blooms in shades of yellow and purple, and they were the first flowers anyone had given her in over a year. She took them, feeling something tight in her chest loosen just slightly. They walked to the courthouse together. The justice of the peace was an older man named Judge Morrison, and he did not ask questions. He simply performed the brief ceremony, and within 10 minutes, Bethany Tucker became Bethany Edwards. Jackson slipped a simple gold band on her finger. It was slightly too large, but he promised to have it resized in town the next time they came in. "You may kiss your bride," Judge Morrison said with a smile. Jackson looked at her, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, and he leaned in and pressed a chaste kiss to her lips. It was quick, almost businesslike, but she felt the warmth of it all the same. They signed the papers, and just like that, her life changed completely. Jackson had a wagon waiting outside, already loaded with the supplies he had bought the day before. He helped her up onto the seat, and she arranged her skirts, very aware of the ring on her finger, the weight of what she had just done settling over her. "It is about an hour to the ranch," he said as he took the reins and guided the horses out of town. "The road is rough in places, so let me know if you need to stop. I will be fine." They rode in silence for a while. The landscape spread out around them, vast and empty and beautiful in its own stark way. The mountains rose in the distance, and the sky was an endless blue dome overhead. She had grown up in the city, where buildings crowded together and the air was thick with smoke. This openness was still strange to her, but she was beginning to appreciate it. "Tell me about the ranch," she said, needing to fill the silence. "It is about 3,000 acres. I run cattle, mostly. I have a crew of 8 men who work the land. They live in the bunkhouse, so they will be around, but they keep to themselves for the most part. The main house is not fancy, but it is solid. 4 bedrooms, a kitchen, a sitting room. There is a barn, a smokehouse, a chicken coop, and a vegetable garden that has been neglected since my mother died. Maybe you could bring it back to life if you are interested. I have never gardened before. Neither had she when she first came here, but she learned. The land will teach you if you let it." She looked at him, this man who was now her husband, and tried to imagine what their life together would be like. He was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and sun-browned skin. His hands on the reins were confident and capable. He did not smile much, but there was a kindness in his eyes that made her feel for the first time in months like maybe she was not entirely alone. "Why did you never marry before?" she asked. He was quiet for a long moment. "I was engaged once, about 6 years ago. Her name was Clara. She was the daughter of a rancher up north. We were going to be married, but she got sick, fever. She died 2 weeks before the wedding. I am so sorry. It was a long time ago, but after that I did not see the point in trying again. I focused on the ranch, on building something that would last. I suppose I convinced myself I did not need anything else. And now I think maybe I was wrong." They fell into silence again, but it was a more comfortable silence this time. She watched the landscape change as they left the flat desert behind and began climbing into the foothills. The air grew slightly cooler, and she could see cottonwood trees lining a creek bed in the distance. "That is the edge of my land," Jackson said, pointing. "The creek runs year-round. It is one of the reasons this land is so valuable. Water is everything out here. They followed the creek for another mile, and then the ranch came into view. The main house was built of wood and stone, weathered but well maintained. It was larger than she had expected, 2 stories with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Behind it, she could see the barn, the bunkhouse, and various other outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and she could hear the lowing of the animals carried on the wind. Jackson pulled the wagon up in front of the house and set the brake. He jumped down and came around to help her, his hands strong and steady as he lifted her down. For a moment they stood face to face, and she was very aware of how close he was, of the solidity of him. "Welcome home," he said. "Home." The word felt foreign and precious at the same time. She followed him up the porch steps and through the front door. The interior was dim and cool after the brightness outside. She had a quick impression of sturdy furniture, a stone fireplace, and windows that let in light but kept out the worst of the heat. "The kitchen is through there," Jackson said, pointing. "Your bedroom is upstairs, second door on the right. Mine is at the end of the hall. I will bring your things up in a moment. Do you need anything right now? Water? Food? Water would be good." He nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. She stood in the front room trying to take it all in. This was her life now. This house, this land, this man who was her husband in name but a stranger in every other way. He returned with a glass of water and a plate of bread and cheese. "I am not much of a cook, but I manage. We will figure out meals. There is a root cellar out back with preserved goods, and the men usually handle their own food in the bunkhouse, but I would be grateful if you felt up to cooking sometimes. I will pay you for the work, of course. You do not have to pay me. I am your wife. This is not a traditional arrangement. You will have your own money. I insist on that." She did not argue. The idea of having her own money, of not being entirely dependent, was too appealing. She drank the water and nibbled at the bread, and he watched her with that same careful attention he had shown in town. "When is the baby due?" he asked. "Late October, I think. Maybe early November. We will get the doctor out here before then, make sure everything is ready. And I will hire a midwife to be here for the birth. You will have help." Tears pricked her eyes again. She was not used to being cared for, to having someone think ahead for her. "Thank you. You do not have to keep thanking me. This is what married people do. They take care of each other." He showed her around the house, and she was relieved to see that it was clean and well organized, though it clearly lacked a woman's touch. Her bedroom was plain but comfortable, with a large bed, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the ranch. He brought up her carpetbag and set it on the bed. "Take your time settling in. I need to check on the men and the cattle, but I will be back for supper. Will you be all right on your own for a few hours?" "Yes, of course." He hesitated at the door as if he wanted to say something more, but then he just nodded and left. She heard his footsteps on the stairs, the front door opening and closing, and then she was alone. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room. This was hers. This space, this safety. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe, setting her hairbrush and the small photograph of her parents on the dresser. Then she lay down on the bed, just for a moment, and the exhaustion that had been building for weeks washed over her. She fell asleep without meaning to, and when she woke, the light outside had shifted to late afternoon. She got up and went downstairs, moving slowly, her body still adjusting. In the kitchen, she found the basics: flour, sugar, coffee, dried beans, salt pork. There was a cast iron stove and a pump at the sink. She could work with this. She started a fire in the stove and put on a pot of coffee, then set about making a simple stew from what she could find. She was stirring the pot when she heard the front door open. Jackson came in, his hat in his hands, his face dusty from the day's work. He stopped when he saw her in the kitchen, surprise flickering across his features. "You did not have to cook. I wanted to. I need to start earning my keep. You are not a servant, I know, but I want to help." He washed up at the sink and they sat down to eat at the small table in the kitchen. The stew was simple, but it was hot and filling, and he ate with obvious appreciation. "This is good," he said. "It is just stew. It is the first home-cooked meal I have had in months, so thank you." They ate in companionable silence, and she found herself relaxing slightly. This was strange, all of it, but it was not unbearable. He was not demanding. He was not cruel. He was just a man trying to do a decent thing, and she could work with that. Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. He was up before dawn, working with the men, checking the cattle, mending fences, doing the endless work that came with running a ranch. She took over the household tasks, cooking and cleaning, and slowly beginning to reclaim the garden. The ranch hands were polite but distant, clearly uncertain what to make of the sudden appearance of a wife. She overheard one of them, a grizzled man named Pete, asking Jackson about it, and Jackson simply said she was his wife, and that was all anyone needed to know. At night, they ate together and talked. Small talk at first about the weather and the ranch and the town, but gradually deeper conversations. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father's death, and the responsibility that had fallen on his shoulders. She told him about St. Louis, about her parents, about her love of reading and her dream of one day having a library of her own. "There are some books in the sitting room," he said. "They were my mother's. You are welcome to them." She found the books the next day, a small collection of novels and poetry, and she devoured them in the evenings, grateful for the escape they provided. Jackson would sit across from her, working on accounts or mending tack, and the silence between them was comfortable. 3 weeks after she arrived at the ranch, she woke in the middle of the night to a sharp pain in her belly. She lay still, breathing through it, hoping it was just the baby moving, but the pain came again, stronger this time. She got up and lit the lamp, her hands shaking. It was too early. The baby was not due for another 6 weeks. This could not be happening. She made it to the door and called out for Jackson. Her voice was weak, but he must have been awake because he was there in seconds, still pulling on his shirt. "What is wrong, the baby? Something is wrong." His face went pale, but his voice stayed calm. "All right, lie down. I'm going to ride to town and get the doctor. I will be back as fast as I can. Do not leave me. I have to, but Pete is here. I will get him to stay with you." He was gone before she could protest. She heard him shouting for Pete, heard the sound of a horse being saddled, and then hoofbeats fading into the night. Pete appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable and worried. "Mrs. Edwards, what do you need me to do? Just stay. Please just stay." He pulled a chair up next to the bed and sat down, his weathered face full of concern. The pains came and went, sharp and frightening, and she gripped the edge of the blanket, trying not to cry out. Time became meaningless. She did not know if it had been minutes or hours when she finally heard the sound of horses returning. Jackson burst into the room with an older man carrying a black bag. "This is Dr. Harlan. He's going to help you." The doctor examined her quickly, his hands gentle but firm. "The baby is not coming yet," he said, "but you are having contractions. You need complete rest. No getting up, no work, nothing. If you are lucky, we can keep this baby inside for a few more weeks. And if I am not lucky, then we prepare for a premature birth and hope for the best." She stayed in bed for the next 4 weeks. It was the longest, most frustrating time of her life, but Jackson was there every step of the way. He brought her meals, read to her in the evenings, and sat with her when the fear became too much. He hired a woman from town, Mrs. Kelly, to come help with the housework, and he took over the cooking himself, though his skills were limited. "This is burned," she said one evening, looking at the charred chicken he had presented with such hope. "I know. I am sorry, I am not good at this." She laughed, the first real laugh she had felt in weeks. "I appreciate the effort." He smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face, and she felt something shift inside her. It was small, just a tiny crack in the walls she had built around her heart, but it was there. In early November, on a cold morning with frost on the windows, the contractions started again, and this time they did not stop. Jackson sent Pete for the doctor and the midwife, and he stayed by her side, holding her hand through the worst of it. The labor was long and hard, and there were moments when she thought she could not do it. But his voice was always there, steady and sure, telling her she was strong, telling her she could do this. When the baby finally came, a tiny, squalling boy with a full head of dark hair, she wept with relief. The midwife cleaned him up and placed him in her arms, and she looked down at her son, overwhelmed with love and gratitude and fear all tangled together. Jackson stood at the bedside, looking down at the baby with an expression of wonder. "He is perfect," he said softly. "You want to hold him." He hesitated, then carefully took the baby, supporting his head the way the midwife showed him. He looked down at the tiny face, and she saw something in his eyes that made her throat tighten. He was not just accepting this child. He was already loving him. "What do you want to name him?" Jackson asked. She had not let herself think about names, too afraid to hope that everything would turn out all right. But now, looking at her son in her husband's arms, the name came to her: Samuel, after my father, Samuel Edwards. That is a good name. Over the next few weeks, they settled into a new routine. The baby was small but healthy, and he grew stronger every day. Jackson had a cradle made and set it up in her room, but more often than not, Samuel ended up in the kitchen with them, sleeping in a basket while she cooked and Jackson worked on accounts. He was surprisingly good with the baby, never hesitant to hold him or change him or walk him when he cried. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Samuel asleep in Jackson's arms, she said, "You did not have to do this, any of this. Why did you?" He looked down at the baby, his expression thoughtful. "When I saw you in the store that day, I saw someone who was alone and afraid and trying so hard to be brave. I have been alone for a long time, and I know what that feels like. I did not want that for you, or for him. But you have given up so much. You could have married someone you loved, had children of your own." He looked up at her, his blue-green eyes serious. "Who says I have given that up?" Her breath caught. "Jackson. I am not asking for anything, Bethany. I am just saying that this, what we are building, it matters to me. You matter to me. And Samuel, he is already mine in every way that counts." She did not know what to say. Her feelings were a tangled mess, gratitude and affection and something deeper that she was afraid to name. She had spent so long guarding her heart, so afraid of being hurt again, that she had not realized when her feelings for him had started to change. "I do not know how to do this," she said quietly. "Neither do I, but we will figure it out together." Winter came to the ranch, bringing snow and cold winds. Jackson taught her how to feed the chickens and collect eggs, how to preserve food and manage the stores. She taught him how to soothe Samuel's colic and which songs the baby liked best. They were partners, working together to keep the household running, and somewhere in the midst of all that work, they became friends. On Christmas Eve, Jackson surprised her with a small tree he had cut from the foothills and set up in the sitting room. She made decorations from paper and ribbon, and they hung them together while Samuel watched from his basket. Jackson had ridden into town the week before and returned with a package wrapped in brown paper. "For you," he said, handing it to her after they had put Samuel to bed. She opened it carefully and found a book, a beautiful leather-bound edition of poetry. "Jackson, this is too much. It is not nearly enough. You have given me more than you know." She had something for him too, a shirt she had sewn from fabric she had found in the wardrobe. It was not fancy, but she had put care into every stitch. He held it up, his expression pleased. "Thank you. I will wear it every Sunday." They sat by the fire, drinking coffee and talking, and she realized how content she was. This life, this man, this family they were creating, it was not what she had planned, but it was good. It was real. In the spring, when Samuel was 5 months old and the wildflowers were blooming across the ranch, Jackson asked her to take a ride with him. Mrs. Kelly came to watch Samuel, and they rode out together, following the creek up into the hills. He took her to a spot where the water pooled, creating a small, clear pond surrounded by cottonwood trees. "This was my favorite place when I was a boy," he said, helping her down from her horse. "I used to come here to think." They sat on the bank, watching the water ripple in the breeze. She could hear birds singing in the trees, and the air smelled sweet and clean. "Bethany, I need to ask you something," he said, his voice serious. Her heart started to pound. "All right. When we got married, I told you I was not asking for anything you were not willing to give. And I meant that. But things have changed, at least for me. I love you. I love Samuel. I want this to be a real marriage in every sense, but only if that is what you want too." She turned to look at him, this man who had saved her, who had given her son a name and a home, who had been patient and kind and everything she had not known she needed. She thought about the life they had built together, the quiet moments and the hard work and the laughter. She thought about how safe she felt with him, how seen. "I love you too," she said, and the words felt like coming home. "I have for a while now. I was just afraid to say it." His face broke into a wide smile, and he reached for her, pulling her close. He kissed her, and it was nothing like the chaste kiss they had shared at their wedding. This was real, full of promise and passion and all the things they had been holding back. When they finally pulled apart, she was breathless and laughing. "So we are doing this?" she asked. "We are doing this." They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, and that night, for the first time, she did not sleep in her own room. She went to his, and they became husband and wife in truth. It was tender and a little awkward. Both of them new to each other in this way, but it was also beautiful, and when she woke in his arms the next morning, she felt a happiness she had never thought possible. Life on the ranch continued, season following season. Samuel grew into a curious, energetic toddler, and Jackson was endlessly patient with him, teaching him about the animals and the land. In the spring of 1880, Bethany discovered she was pregnant again. This time, there was no fear, no shame, only joy. Jackson was over the moon, and when their daughter, Rose, was born that November, he held her with the same tenderness he had always shown Samuel. "2 children," he said, marveling. "We are building quite a family. Is that all right with you?" "It is more than all right. It is everything." As the years passed, they added on to the house, building more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Samuel grew into a strong, capable boy who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Rose was quieter, more thoughtful, with a love of books that reminded Jackson of Bethany. They had a third child in 1883, another boy they named James, and their family was complete. Bethany never forgot the fear and desperation that had brought her to Lovelock, but it felt like another lifetime. She had been running from shame, from a man who had betrayed her, from a future that seemed hopeless. And she had found Jackson, who had seen her at her lowest and had offered her not judgment but grace. He had kept his promise. He had raised Samuel as his own, loving him without reservation, and Samuel never knew any father but Jackson. One evening, when Samuel was 10 years old, Jackson took him out to the barn to help with the evening chores. Bethany watched them from the porch, her heart full. Rose was beside her, reading a book in the fading light, and James was playing with a wooden horse Jackson had carved for him. "Mama, why do people call Papa the best man in the county?" Rose asked, looking up from her book. Bethany smiled. "Because he is." He saw someone who needed help, and he did not hesitate. He opened his heart and his home, and he has been doing that ever since. "I want to be like him when I grow up." "Then you will be a very good person indeed." That night, after the children were in bed, Bethany and Jackson sat on the porch watching the stars. The air was cool and clear, and she could hear the distant sound of cattle and the rustle of wind through the grass. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Marrying me, taking on Samuel?" He pulled her closer, his arm around her shoulders. "Not for a single moment. You and those children are the best thing that ever happened to me. I was just existing before you came along. You taught me how to live. You saved me. No, we saved each other." She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She thought about the girl she had been, frightened and alone, hiding her pregnancy and hoping for a miracle. And she thought about the woman she had become, strong and loved and part of something bigger than herself. "I love you, Jackson Edwards." "I love you too, Bethany Edwards. Always." The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and milestones. Samuel proved to have a natural way with horses, and by the time he was 15, he was helping Jackson break and train the animals. He was a good boy, kind and hardworking, and Jackson often said he could not be prouder if Samuel had been his own blood. But to Jackson, he was his own blood in all the ways that mattered. Rose grew into a beautiful young woman with a sharp mind and a love of learning. She begged for books every time they went to town, and Bethany made sure she had them. Jackson built her a small library in one of the extra rooms, shelves floor to ceiling, and it became her favorite place in the house. James was the adventurous one, always getting into scrapes and coming home muddy and grinning. He kept them on their toes, but he had a good heart and a fierce loyalty to his family. In 1888, when Samuel was 10 years old and starting to ask questions about where babies came from, Bethany and Jackson decided it was time to tell him the truth. They sat him down one evening after the other children had gone to bed, and Bethany took his hand. "Samuel, there is something we need to tell you, something important." He looked between them, his young face serious. "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart, nothing like that. But you are getting older, and we think you deserve to know the truth about where you came from." Jackson leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Samuel, I am your father in every way that matters to me. I have loved you since the moment I first saw you. But the truth is, I did not help bring you into this world. Your mother was pregnant with you when we got married." Samuel's eyes widened. "So you are not my real father." "I am your real father," Jackson said firmly. "Do not ever doubt that. But another man gave you life, a man who was not worthy of your mother or of you. I chose to be your father, and I would make that choice again every single day." Bethany watched her son's face, holding her breath. He was quiet for a long moment, processing the information. Then he looked at Jackson. "Did you marry Mama because of me?" "I married your mother because she needed help, and I had the means to give it. But I stayed married to her, and I built this life with her because I fell in love with her. And with you. You made me want to be a better man." Samuel's eyes filled with tears, and he threw his arms around Jackson's neck. "You are the best father anyone could ask for. I do not care about the other man. You are my papa." Jackson held him tight, his own eyes wet. "And you are my son. Always." Bethany wiped her tears and pulled them both into a hug. They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them holding each other, and she felt a deep sense of peace. The truth was out, and it had not shattered anything. If anything, it had made their bond stronger. Over the next few years, the ranch continued to prosper. Jackson expanded the herd and bought more land, and the Edwards name became synonymous with quality cattle and fair dealing. Bethany became active in the community, helping to start a school in Lovelock and organizing supplies for families in need. She never forgot what it was like to be desperate and afraid, and she made sure no woman in their town ever had to face that alone. Samuel grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like Jackson, with Bethany's dark hair and thoughtful eyes. When he was 18, a young woman named Alina came to town with her family, and Samuel was smitten. Jackson and Bethany watched the courtship with amusement and affection, remembering their own unconventional beginning. "He is so nervous around her," Bethany said one evening, watching Samuel fumble with his hat as Alina and her family visited. "He will be fine. He has a good example to follow." "Do we? We got married because I was desperate and you were kind. We got married for practical reasons, but we stayed married for love. That is what matters." Samuel and Alina were married in the spring of 1890, and they built a house on the far edge of the ranch. Rose, now 15, was blossoming into a confident young woman who announced she wanted to be a teacher. Jackson supported her completely, arranging for her to attend a teaching college in Carson City. James, at 12, declared he was going to be a rancher like his father, and he followed Jackson everywhere, learning everything he could. In the summer of 1892, Bethany discovered she was pregnant again. She was nearly 36 years old, and the pregnancy was unexpected but not unwelcome. Jackson was delighted, and the children were excited to have another sibling. The pregnancy was difficult, though, and the doctor ordered her to rest as much as possible. "You are not as young as you used to be," the doctor said bluntly. "You need to take care of yourself." Jackson took over even more of the household duties, and the children pitched in. Rose came home from college to help, and Samuel and Alina visited often. It was a time of closeness and love, the whole family pulling together. In February of 1893, Bethany gave birth to a healthy baby girl they named Grace. She was a surprise, a late blessing, and she was doted on by everyone. Samuel, now a father himself to a baby boy, marveled at how much work babies were. "You made it look easy," he told his mother. It was never easy, but it was always worth it. As Grace grew, the family continued to thrive. The ranch was one of the most successful in the county, and the Edwards name was respected. But more than that, they were happy. Jackson and Bethany had built something strong and lasting, not just in terms of land and cattle, but in terms of love and family. On their 20th anniversary, Jackson took Bethany back to the pond in the hills where he had first told her he loved her. They rode out in the early morning, the air cool and fresh, and sat by the water just as they had all those years ago. 20 years, he said, shaking his head. "It feels like a lifetime and like no time at all. Do you remember how scared I was when we got married?" "I remember." "I was pretty scared too, if I am being honest. I had no idea if I was doing the right thing. I just knew I could not let you face everything alone. You gave me everything. A home, a name, a family, a life. I do not know how to thank you for that." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the gold band she still wore. "You do not have to thank me. You gave me just as much. Before you, I was going through the motions, living but not really alive. You woke me up. You made me want more, want better. I love you so much. I love you too. More than I ever thought possible." They kissed, and it was as sweet and full of promise as their first real kiss had been all those years ago. When they rode back to the ranch, hand in hand, she felt the same happiness and peace she had felt that day. This was her life. This was her family. And it was more than she had ever dreamed possible. The years moved forward, as they always do. Samuel and Alina had 3 children, and they ran their section of the ranch with skill and care. Rose became a beloved teacher in Lovelock, eventually marrying a kind man named Thomas who worked at the bank. James took over more and more of the ranch operations as Jackson got older, proving himself to be just as capable as his father. Grace grew into a spirited, joyful girl who kept everyone on their toes. In 1905, Jackson and Bethany celebrated their 27th anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. The house was full of noise and laughter, and Bethany stood in the kitchen, looking out at the chaos, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. Jackson came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought I could be." "Good. Because I plan on keeping you happy for a long time yet." She turned in his arms and looked up at him. His hair was graying at the temples now, and there were lines around his eyes, but he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. More than that, he was the best man she had ever known. "Thank you for seeing me that day in the store. Thank you for not turning away. Thank you for taking a chance on me, for trusting me with your heart and your son's future. Our son, he has always been ours. Yes, ours." Samuel came into the kitchen, now a man of 31 with gray just starting to show in his own hair. "Mama, Papa, everyone is asking for you. We want to make a toast." They went into the sitting room where the whole family was gathered. Samuel raised his glass and everyone fell quiet. "I want to say something," he began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Mama, Papa, you gave me everything. A home, a name, a family, a future. You taught me what it means to love unconditionally, to work hard, to treat people with respect. Everything I am, everything I have, I owe to you. So here is to you, and to the life you have built. May you have many more years of happiness together." Everyone raised their glasses, and Bethany found herself crying, happy tears that she made no effort to hide. Jackson squeezed her hand, and she saw that his eyes were wet too. "To family," Jackson said, his voice rough with emotion. "To love that lasts, and to never giving up on each other." They drank, and then the conversation started up again, loud and joyful. Bethany looked around at her children and grandchildren, at the life she and Jackson had created, and she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had started with nothing, running from shame and fear, and she had ended up with everything. Not because of luck, but because one man had seen her, truly seen her, and had offered her grace. As the evening wound down and the family began to leave, Samuel pulled Bethany aside. "Mama, I want you to know something. I have never once felt like I was not Papa's son. He has loved me so completely that I never even thought to question it. You too gave me the greatest gift. You showed me what real love looks like." "Oh, Samuel," she hugged him tight. "You have always been so loved, from the very beginning." "I know. And I have tried to pass that on to my own children. The way Papa loved me, that is how I love them. It is the greatest legacy he could have given me." After everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, Bethany and Jackson sat on the porch, watching the stars. It was their favorite place, this porch, where they had shared so many conversations over the years. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you had not seen me that day?" Bethany asked. "Sometimes. And I know it would have been emptier, lonelier. I would have had the ranch, but I would not have had you, and that would have been a tragedy. I think about it too. Where I would be, what would have happened to Samuel and me, it terrifies me even now. You do not have to think about it anymore. That is not your life. This is your life. And it is a good one. The best." They sat in comfortable silence, and Bethany thought about the journey they had taken together. It had not always been easy. There had been hard years, drought and disease and all the challenges that came with ranch life. But they had faced it all together, and that had made all the difference. In the spring of 1910, Jackson fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, and it progressed into something more serious. The doctor diagnosed him with pneumonia and ordered complete rest. Bethany nursed him day and night, refusing to leave his side. The children took over the ranch, working together to keep everything running smoothly. For a while, it looked like Jackson might not pull through. Bethany sat by his bed, holding his hand, praying harder than she had ever prayed in her life. She could not imagine life without him. He was her partner, her love, her best friend. He had to get better, and he did. Slowly, over weeks and then months, he regained his strength. By summer, he was back on his feet, though the doctor warned him to take it easy. He was not a young man anymore, and he needed to be careful. "I am not ready to leave you yet," Jackson told Bethany one evening as they sat on the porch. "I still have too much living to do." "Good. Because I am not ready to let you go." They had 7 more good years together. Years filled with grandchildren and laughter and quiet moments of contentment. In 1917, Jackson passed away peacefully in his sleep, Bethany at his side. He was 67 years old, and he had lived a full, rich life. The funeral was held at the ranch, and it seemed like the whole county turned out. People spoke of his fairness, his generosity, his integrity. But the most moving tribute came from Samuel, who stood before the crowd and spoke of the man who had chosen to be his father. "He did not have to love me. But he did. From the very first moment, he loved me as his own. He gave me his name, his time, his wisdom, his heart. He showed me what it means to be a man of honor, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to live up to his example." Bethany stood between her children, surrounded by the family they had built, and she grieved deeply. But she also felt gratitude. She had been given 39 years with Jackson Edwards, 39 years of love and partnership and family. It was more than she had ever hoped for, that day in the general store when her world had been falling apart. She lived another 15 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, active in the community, still sharp and strong despite her age. She watched Samuel become one of the most respected ranchers in Nevada. Rose's children grow up to be teachers and doctors. James expand the ranch even further, and Grace marry and have a family of her own. When Bethany passed away in 1932 at the age of 76, she was laid to rest beside Jackson on a hill overlooking the ranch. The headstone read, "Bethany Edwards, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She taught us that family is not just about blood but about love." Samuel, now in his 50s with grandchildren of his own, stood at her grave and spoke to his children and grandchildren about the woman who had given him life and the man who had given him a future. "They saved each other," he said. "And in doing so, they built something that will last for generations. They taught us that love is a choice you make every day, that family is what you create, and that grace and second chances can change everything." The Edwards Ranch continued to thrive, passed down through the generations. And the story of Jackson and Bethany, of how a rancher saw a frightened woman hiding her pregnancy and said he would raise that child like his own, became part of the family legend. It was told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is offer kindness to someone in need, and that sometimes the greatest love stories start not with passion, but with compassion. The land that Jackson had worked so hard to build remained in the family, a testament to the life he and Bethany had created together. Their descendants carried on their legacy, running the ranch with the same integrity and care that Jackson had shown. And every generation made sure the youngest children knew the story, knew where they came from, knew that their family was built on a foundation of love that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with choice. In the end, Jackson Edwards had kept his promise. He had raised Samuel as his own, loved him without reservation, and given him a life full of opportunity and security. But he had also gained so much more than he had given. He had found love, built a family, and created a legacy that would endure long after he was gone. And Bethany Tucker, who had arrived in Lovelock, Nevada in 1878 with nothing but fear and desperation, had found not just safety but a home. She had found a partner who saw her worth when she could not see it herself, who offered her grace when the world offered only judgment. Together, they had built something beautiful, something lasting, something that proved that the best families are not always the ones you are born into, but the ones you create with love, patience, and unwavering commitment. Their story lived on, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most ordinary moments, and that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. Jackson had seen a woman in need and had offered his hand. Bethany had taken it, trusting in the kindness of a stranger. And from that simple act of compassion, a great love had grown, one that would echo through generations and remind everyone who heard it that love, real love, is not about perfection. It is about showing up, day after day, and choosing each other over and over again. The sun set over the Edwards Ranch, casting long shadows across the land that had witnessed so much life, so much love. And if you listened carefully, you could almost hear the echoes of laughter, the sound of children playing, the low murmur of two people sitting on a porch, talking about their day. The ranch was alive with memories, with the legacy of two people who had taken a chance on each other and built something extraordinary. That was the true measure of their love. Not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in the steady, faithful commitment they had shown each other every single day. In the way Jackson had held Bethany's hand through labor, in the way she had nursed him through illness, in the laughter they had shared and the tears they had dried, in the family they had raised and the values they had instilled, in the way they had chosen, every single day, to love each other well. And so the story of Jackson and Bethany Edwards became more than just a family tale. It became a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of commitment, and the enduring nature of true love. It was proof that sometimes the most broken beginnings can lead to the most beautiful endings, and that the greatest gift you can give another person is not wealth or status, but the simple, profound act of seeing them, accepting them, and loving them exactly as they are. Their love had started with a promise: I will raise that child like my own. And Jackson had kept that promise every day for the rest of his life. But what he had not known, that day in the general store when he first spoke those words, was that in keeping that promise, he would find everything he had been missing: purpose, family, and a love so deep and true that it would sustain him through all the challenges life brought his way. Bethany had been hiding her pregnancy, terrified and alone. The rancher had seen her, truly seen her, and had offered salvation. But salvation, they discovered, was not a one-way street. They had saved each other, two broken people who had found wholeness in each other's arms. And from that unlikely beginning, they had built a legacy of love that would endure for generations. A reminder that the best things in life often come from the most unexpected places, and that true love is always, always worth the risk.